Welcome to another episode of the Unexpected Detour. Where in life detours are inevitable. I've been thinking lately about something, a phrase many of us have heard before. The devil made me do it. Maybe you've heard someone say it. Maybe you even said it yourself. Sometimes people say it jokingly. Sometimes they mean it. But the more I think about that statement, the more I find myself asking a different question. Was it really the devil, or was it the choice I made despite knowing better? That question may make some people uncomfortable, but stay with me here. I am not suggesting that temptation does not exist. I am not suggesting that evil does not exist. What I am suggesting is that we sometimes give away responsibility that belongs to us. There is a difference between temptation and decision. There is a difference between influence and action. There's a difference between presented with a choice and actually making that choice. And somewhere in the middle of all of that is something we do not talk about nearly enough: our conscience. That quiet voice, that feeling deep inside that says, this is not a good idea. That hesitation before we say something hurtful. That discomfort before we tell a lie. That warning before we ignore a boundary. That inner knowing that tries to get our attention. Most of us have experienced it. The question is whether we listen to it. I can think of moments in my own life when my conscience spoke clearly and I ignored it, not because the devil forced me, not because someone made me, but because I chose not to listen. That is the difficult truth. But it also is a freeing truth, because if my choices help create some of the problems, then my choices can also help create a different future. When I think about some of the decisions I have made throughout my life, I can honestly say there were times when I knew better. There were times when something inside said, slow down. There is a consequence attached to this. Think about this. Yet I moved forward anyway. Not because I was a bad person, not because I was incapable of making good decisions, but because I'm human. And being human means we do not always choose wisely. The problem with blaming everything on the devil is that it can prevent us from examining ourselves. It can keep us from asking important questions. Why did I make that decision? What was I looking for? What was I avoiding? What lesson was I refusing to learn? Growth begins when we become willing to ask those questions. Accountability is not punishment. Accountability is information. It helps us understand ourselves. It helps us recognize patterns. It helps us make different choices moving forward. Scripture gives us examples of people who had choices to make. Adam blamed Eve. Eve blamed the serpent. Everyone was looking somewhere else for responsibility, yet each person still had to answer for their own actions. That lesson remains relevant today. We blame circumstances. We blame our past. We blame other people. We blame bad luck. And sometimes we blame the devil. But growth often begins when we stop looking outward and start looking inward, not to condemn ourselves, not to shame ourselves, but to understand ourselves. Perhaps the greater question is not whether the devil tempted us. Perhaps the greater question is why we ignored what we already knew. why we ignored the warning, why we ignored our conscience, why we ignored the wisdom available to us. Because somewhere between temptation and action, a choice is made, and that choice belongs to us. The good news is that mistakes do not have to define us. Poor decisions do not have to become permanent identities. Regret does not have to become our future. We can learn, we can grow, and we can change. We can make different choices. This is one of the greatest gifts God gives us, the opportunity to learn that yesterday while creating a better tomorrow. Um, so let me leave you with this. How many times have you ignored your conscience and blamed something or someone else for the outcome? How many times did you already know what was right, but you chose differently? And what might change in your life if you stop asking, who can I blame? And start asking, what I can learn. Because growth begins where excuses end. And sometimes the most powerful words we can say are not, the devil made me do it. Sometimes the most powerful words are, I made that choice. Now what can I learn from it? Thank you for joining me for another episode of the Unexpected Detour, wherein life detours are inevitable. This episode is available on YouTube and all major streaming platforms. Please follow, subscribe, and share the Unexpected Detour podcast so you won't miss any upcoming episodes. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, keep listening to that quiet voice that calls you towards wisdom. Take care and God bless. Okay.